If I'm around by then, I'll be in my 90s, probably not gaming. I've seen a lot of videos lately on collecting video games, whether it's to play them or just to have them in your collection. That last part, it doesn't really matter. The actual acquisition of them, for whatever reason, is what matters here. And people talk about how it's dead or dying, collecting them. And I just don't agree. Other collectors say, everyone who wants a copy of Deadpool on the PS4 already has one. Or, everyone's already built up their collections. And that's just not true. People who are entering and exiting the space, they're starting and stopping every day. Someone that started collecting in 2007 might be very well done by now, or has been done for a while, depending on which consoles and systems they're nostalgic for. Someone that just entered the space in the last year or two is very much underway with their collection, and I've met a number of you through these videos. And if you've ever taken a moment to comment or leave an encouraging note, thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you, and I hope to hear from you again. My point in making this video is collecting goes through seasons. That's a term that I heard most often from the Y2K collector, and I thoroughly enjoy his content, and honestly, I've modeled some of my style after him. He's a great example too. He's recently exited the collecting scene, and at least from video games, to exploring other opportunities. And that's great, but that doesn't mean that it's dead. And there are many like him that are selling off for one reason or another. Whatever the reason, that doesn't mean the hobby's dead, or the industry is dying, or that the market is crippling. Now, I do feel it's true that older console generations are less desirable now, and they may have been much more popular 10 or 20 years ago. So let's take a look at a few examples and try and make some predictions. We're going to start with the original Nintendo, the NES. Who out here is buying the NES or the Nintendo consoles today? Now, fair warning with these numbers, they're not available online for research, or at least I couldn't find them. So I did ask questions of AI, things like what's the general buyer's age range, what percentage of buyers are buying things. But by the end of this reasoning, it was very clear to me, and I hope it's going to be clear to you too. So with the NES, it's going to be the younger Gen X and the older millennials. This was likely the first piece of gaming hardware whoever touched, or that we ever touched, and we grew up playing the NES. This group makes up 60% of the current sales on the NES from local video game stores that sell retro, with older Gen X making up the vast majority of the rest. Now, how about the SNES? Let's just stick with the Nintendo for now and ignore the Sega Genesis because it's used to that. It's going to be younger to mid-millennials. Now, I fall between the mid and older millennial bracket, and for me, this generation is what I'm most nostalgic for. Though I do love the Sega Genesis personally, but I digress. Younger to mid-millennials make up 60% of the sales for this generation, with Gen X again making up the vast majority of the rest. So we skewed a little bit younger this time. Now what if we move to the original PlayStation? Younger millennials now make up the majority of sales today, again around 60%, while Gen X has taken a drastic dip. By the time the PlayStation came out, Gen X was in their 20s, they've moved on from gaming. It just wasn't seen as a hobby for adults, it was a childish hobby then. Try again with the PlayStation 2. Who's the biggest audience today for that? Here we finally see a significant increase from Gen Z, with strong presence from millennials. This is the console that Gen Z started with. The PS2 is to them what the NES was to me. And isn't it interesting that millennials and Gen Z are now starting to have more wealth and more disposable income, and Gen Z is finally getting that disposable income, and there's a huge overlap on this particular system, the PS2. It's also insanely popular, and it had a massive install base because it was a well-priced DVD player, so the familiarity with the PS2 is all over the place. But we have skewed younger now on what's popular. Dare we take a look at the PS3? No, it dips right back to millennials and older Gen Z again, just like the PS2. It's not a drop. So why has it stopped skewing younger? Well, the PS2, we started to factor in the disposable income, and that's a key factor. If you played on the PS3 as your first console when it came out in 2006, you're likely 28 to 34 now. Have you noticed on YouTube that there is a growing number of "so I tried the PS3 out in 2026" kind of videos? Why? Maybe because this age group is just now sinking their teeth into disposable income too. Coincidence? The PS3, the Xbox 360 prices, they're seeing an increase now? I've even heard Wii is starting to see an increase. It's seasonal. What these older collectors enjoyed has already come to pass. The Sega CD had its day in the sun. The PlayStation, while I could argue will always be popular, has passed its prime collection age. All you have to do is look back before the NES to the Atari 2600, and what do we see? $1 to $5 cartridges at every yard sale and flea market as far as the eye can see. Now, will every console get to that point? I can't say for sure, but what I likely can say with high certainty is that collecting isn't dead. The age range has just shifted, as it has for the last 20 years. This market has a much wider eye on it now, and a lot more exposure thanks to technologies like YouTube. And the PS3, the Wii, the 360, they're going to continue rising for the next 5 years to a degree. They might not get as high as the GameCube or the original PlayStation have, but it should rise if past trends continue, both in popularity and in price. And in about 8 to 10 years, the PlayStation 4 is going to do the exact same thing as that crowd becomes 28 to 34. They experience disposable income for the first time. They start to buy the games. Today, it's the cheapest PS4 games will ever be. Smart collectors will have their entire PS4 collection complete by 2034. And who knows, maybe by then I'm going to say, nobody's collecting anymore, the industry is dying. And what of PS5? Let's just assume that the PS5 is the last generation to have physical media. If that's the case, then this hobby may have an expiration date, but what could that be? The PS5 came out in 2020. Again, if I was nostalgic for the PS5, then I'll be 28 to 34 with disposable income around 2048 to 2054. And that's likely the peak, where the PS5 peak pricing is going to be for this media and peak nostalgia. And if people slowly age out of gaming, I would predict that the market to be all closer to the Atari across all generations by maybe 2080. If I'm around by then, I'll be in my 90s, probably not gaming. I've probably sold off my collection to the 15% who have retro interest at that time at a fraction of what it's worth today. Even if it still works. I mean, who knows if it's going to work. I'm just applying existing trending logic to the future as a possible outcome. You know, other hobbies like stamp collecting, quilting, even your average shade tree mechanic, they're all on the decline. Hobbies aren't popularized and the skills aren't passed down from one generation to the next. But right now, no. Video game collecting isn't dead. Retro collecting isn't dead. Modern collecting isn't dead. It's just shifting. And we likely aren't in tune with the newer generation coming into it as well as we'd like to think we are, and thus we have a bubble view of what's real. If you made it to the end, thank you. What's your take? I observe this very behavior in my local game stores, and I see the older gamers gravitate toward the 80s and 90s systems, and the younger to more modern games. And it's obviously not a hard, fast rule, but if you stop and just watch, maybe you'll spot it too. Let me know, and let's build a collection.